The aim of this little presentation is to share my ideas about maintenance of implants and therapy of peri-implantitis. Yeah, dear colleagues, we have to live in harmony with our bacteria and our biofilms. You might know that women harbor more bacteria than human cells. You might see your wife in a different way. But anyway, this points out why we need to live in harmony with our bacteria. If something goes wrong, for example, we allow bacteria to accumulate around dental implants, the body reaction, the immunoreaction reacts bad and destroys tissues. We do know that. And we as periodontists believe if we get rid of bad bugs and get back good bugs, that might be a solution to get in harmony, in symbiosis with our biofilm again. What are we dealing with? A planktonic infection is an acute infection. Because of those bacteria grow rapidly, they are susceptible to antibiotics. If we set some pressure on those bacteria, for example, if you use antibiotics or we have a good immunodefense, then those bacteria have two choices. They can either die or they can accumulate and form biofilms. They form pili to adhere to each other, to adhere to the substrate, and they form substrate, slimy substrate, to fix on surfaces, and they grow very slowly. This is the reason why those bacteria are protected by the biofilm, and we do need doses of antibiotics which are not very healthy to us as patients. And finally, we conclude it is at least difficult to treat infections of biofilms. This is the agenda I would like to discuss with you today. Aims of therapy. What are we aiming for if we are treating peri-implantitis? Less bleeding, or what could be a real aim for us to have a long-term stability? Then I would like to discuss current treatment concepts, and then I would like to introduce the galvano electrode approach I was announced with. First of all, let's think. That's very rarely a mistake to start with thinking. What happens to an implant surface which is not covered by bone and is exposed to the oral cavity? On the left slide, you do see a smooth, a machine surface. We saw nice pictures before, and a moderate rough surface. And we tried to expose different implant surfaces from different brands and different grades of titanium to bacteria, to oral bacteria. This is after day 1, this is after day 3, and I can promise you after day 14, you don't see any difference between those surfaces. Every surface is covered by a biofilm. This is not new. We know that from literature before. Bacterial colonization starts immediately after placing the implant, after we expose it to the oral cavity. So what do we need to have success? First of all, we need to remove the biofilm. Then we need a surface where bone wants to grow on again, where we can achieve a re-osseointegration. I really do believe if we don't get a re-osseointegration, then we will fail on long term. And what is re-osseointegration? This is not only bone which grows back and which we see nicely on an X-ray. In histology, we see that this bone is not connected to the implant surface. What will happen to this implant? We all do know that. That will be a failure on long term. Let's discuss on the basis of our thoughts current treatment concepts. Do you believe we need a plastic curette or is a titanium curette superior? This picture speaks for itself. I don't need to explain that we are not able to remove biofilm with those mechanical devices. If we accelerate these little particles with air pressure, those particles are slowed very fast by the air resistance. So it is clear that in the manufacturer's manual, you will find that you have an ideal working distance from 3 to 5 millimeters and a working angle between 3 and 60 degrees. How can you achieve these requirements if we treat crater-like bone defects? How can we reach with devices like this undercuts of threads? And how can we clean the microstructures we saw in the SEM? This is an SEM of an implant surface. You might see this little red dot. This is the size of a bacteria, and you see the size of the holes in this sandblasted and edged surface. So I don't think we will remove bacteria with a device like this in a perfect manner. Funny-wise, if you look to literature, you don't see any difference in clinical results using cotton pellets and sodium chloride. Isn't that cool? You could buy a laser for 80,000 euros or using a cotton pellet and achieving the same result. What's with titanium brushes? I let the pictures talk for itself. I also do not know what this little structure on this brush is for. Maybe it's a bone grinder. I don't have any idea. But I'm sure with this device we will not be able to remove a biofilm completely. A laser is also not able to achieve, have access. With a laser you don't have access to undercuts and to this rough or moderate rough implant surfaces. And if you're desperate enough, then you might polish the surface. Tattooing is in. Maybe this is another chance for business development, titanium tattooing. But I don't want to choke too much. Let's see what happens to this implant. We removed it after 1 year because the infection came back and put it to an SEM. And of course, we found a biofilm covering the polished surface, and there was no re-osseointegration possible. If we look to the literature, you all know them better than me. We have a bunch of literature. I picked up just the one of Marco Esposito. He proved that in some indications, he found a relapse up to 100% of the cases. If we summarize that, we can for sure state that the treatment of peri-implantitis is at least difficult. If this ablative therapy is failing, wouldn't it be cool if we would have some, let me say, helpers which penetrate the biofilm and act under the biofilm directly on the surface of the titanium, independently from the kind of the surface, brand, or type of titanium. And this is possible. We achieve that by a galvanoelectric approach. If we load the implant with a current and we have ions, these ions would penetrate the biofilm within milliseconds and act on the surface. And I will show you how. In this image you see the connector and the spray head, and in blue you see the cleaning solution which allows the current. It has a conductivity which is appropriate. By the currents, water is split into hydrogen cations and anions. The cations penetrate the biofilm within milliseconds, and the implant is loaded negatively, 4 to 5 volts. Those hydrogen cations pick up an electron, and you all know what we get. We will have hydrogen. We will have hydrogen which bubbles the biofilm away, which lifts off the biofilm by bubbles. This takes a time, only 1 minute till the biofilm is completely removed in vitro. Clinically, we use now a device and working for 2 minutes to be sure. And I will share, first of all, the in vitro tests we did the last 7 years. This is one of the developer you see, Holger Ziprich. He acts as a guinea pig for us because he doesn't get an implant on this missing molar. You see this grayish plastic tube protecting the implant inside from being contaminated by epithelium cells or debris from the mouth. And this allows a biofilm to grow. You see it in the central picture. And if we put this to the cleaning solution, apply a voltage, 4 to 5 volts, then you see the hydrogen bubbles lifting off the biofilm. And of course, we harvested some of those test implants, put it to the SEM before and after. And here you can see the biofilm after a few days. I think it was 8 days, I'm not quite sure to be honest. And after cleaning, this is a surface looking really like a fresh implant surface. Does it work only for a sandblasted and etched surface? No. We tested, as I said before, different surfaces, different brands, different kinds of alloys, and there was no difference found. We were able to remove the biofilm completely. Then we asked dentists to send us implants which were explanted because of peri-implantitis. We get a collection of about 300 implants, different brands and everything. We cleaned it, and you can see the bone on the surface, and the surface completely clean, and the clinical picture of the implant showed the bone remained on the implant. So one question I'm asked always, does it harm the bone? Of course it doesn't, because the cleaning solution is not in contact with the implant. So there is no voltage, so the bone stays undamaged. Again, it works also for different surfaces. This is a TPS surface, and you see the bone on the TPS surface in place and a higher magnification. We didn't find any bacteria. Yeah, you might say this is just in vitro testing. What is with a real biofilm? These explanted implants, the biofilm was dried, and this is something different from a living biofilm. So we produced the specimen you see here. You see 2 areas of interest where we did all our testing. We investigated air powder spray, photodynamic therapy, plasma 1, and different techniques. I just focus on air powder spray to stay in time. We proved, you have to turn on your head, obviously. We proved that it takes 14 days to achieve a mature biofilm with this method. And this was the same biofilm which we used for each specimen. We still stored them to prove that it's possible to repeat this testing. On the left side, you see the Galvosurg. After cleaning it, we put it to an Eppendorf tube, incubated it with a nutrition solution, and breeded it. And if you compare this, you see this is a clear solution, and this looks somehow different. Then we plated it out on a blood agar to count colony-forming units, and we didn't find any in the Galvosurg approach, and we also were not able to count colonies in the air powder spray because everything grew together. After we thinned it to 1 to 1 million, we were able to count single colony-forming units. Of course, other tests are possible. This is a fluorescence test, the contaminated surface, and the surface comparing the 2 techniques I talked about. Every green dot stands for a living bacteria. Conclusions. What can we prove or claim today? We demonstrated by SEM that we are able to remove the biofilm completely with all the limitations of these techniques. We can, I didn't talk about that, but we can regain hydrophilic surfaces. We can cultivate no bacteria, and we cannot stain bacteria. And this process works independently of surface characteristics and manufacturer. Ongoing are several in vitro studies and, of course, a multi-center study. And the last word is the most interesting for me. Of course, we can treat peri-implantitis, but the most cool thing would be if we needn't to raise a flap and to have a device just cleaning an implant with a 1 or 2 millimeter bone loss. And this will be the next step. Thank you for your kind attention.